I have this conundrum in my life. I have something that I could 10x on a ton of money, but I'm unhappy with it, or I don't know what to do. And so he was like, you need to shut down your business. And the rationale that he provided was you cannot climb up a new mountain unless you climb down the one that you're on. So it's like, but yeah, you got your job. What are you afraid of? Yeah, you'll lose some money with opportunity cost, but what are you afraid of?
All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode to Breaking Resistance, and I am super psyched today because I have a tremendous friend and colleague and cohort and collaborator. I don't, so many labels I can throw on this guy for me, and superstar that we've been aiming to have him on the podcast forever, and it's just been going back and forth for a while. So finally, it's here. The day is
It's
here.
here.
Where
Yeah.
we have our esteemed Hemal Badiani in here, but I'll let Francisco introduce himself first and then Hemal.
Yeah. So thanks again for joining us on Breaker Resistance. So again, like John mentioned, we've been trying to get Hemel, but he's just a busy dude. It's just making it happen in the market. So I think everyone's gonna really get a kick out of today's episode. So Hemel, we'd like to welcome you to the show.
I'm extremely excited. Thank you guys for inviting me, and you guys are doing some tremendous work, and I look to sharing my journey and learn from you guys over the course of this conversation as well.
Yeah, no, it's actually the opposite, man. We're trying to learn from you, so we're trying to keep up to your level. But for our listeners, I mean, John and I know you very well, and we've been trying to work on some projects together. But just for our listeners, if you can kind of give us a 30,000 on yourself and your background, and then we can kind of dive in a little bit further on your journey.
Yep, yeah. 42 years age, husband, father of twin babies, now 7 year old, 7.5 years old, boy and a girl. I grew up in India for the first 19 years of my life. Then I came to this land of opportunities, came here to study, and then moved around to London to chase my then girlfriend, now my wife of 17 years. And that led me to a path from a professional standpoint to management consulting across three continents, whereby I worked with everybody from Disney theme parks to the Vatican. Really insightful journey there. And then that gig took me around every week from a journey standpoint. Really worked with very smart CEOs, COOs to help them shape their businesses, whether it's cost cutting, mergers, product innovation, strategy, and really helped me hone my skill set and competency. And then once my kids were born, I decided to hang up my traveling boots. It allowed me to then transition to a much more peaceful position at the bank. I was senior vice president with one of the banks for a few years. And after changing a few thousand diapers, I started getting bored. So I decided to think about introspect of where I needed to be, what my superpowers were, and that led me to a journey of scaling multiple businesses, starting from an outsourcing company, then a private lending company, then a residential real estate, and then eventually we've got a commercial real estate company. And so our commercial real estate arm, after all those businesses, is at this snapshot in time. It's 30 months old. We went to from zero to 150 million in assets under development and management. We've got 13 people in the company, and super excited for the next phase of where we are in terms of the market and what we are trying to do in this beautiful game of commercial real estate.
That is awesome. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and dissect that. I know that was a lot for a lot of folks, but being the fact that you have already honed a really good skill, which is diaper management, so I kudos to that. So I mean, you have probably already one of the top skills that most folks don't already have. So, but we'll go ahead and let's dissect that a little bit because you took us on an entire journey. But we want to kind of get really into the weeds. So, kind of take us into like what that looked like in childhood for you in those 19
Yeah.
years that you were in India? Like, what was that upbringing for you before transitioning?
Yeah, it was very unique from my vantage point. It was It's a mid-sized town back in India, and if you think about India as a diamond, on the west side of India is a state called Gujarat, where most of the big entrepreneurs come from. So there's a lot of entrepreneurial hustling spirit. My father and my granddad were both entrepreneurs. Uh, I think it's just proximity mindset. It seems like there's just people that want to be on their own, be their own boss. They believe that provision of their own time and working hard would lead to some level of scalability. So that's what leadership has been defined there for the most part. Not that there are no employees there, but a lot of people just want to hustle at the next level that I don't even think I can be successful at in terms of how they deal with volume and margin in a uber competitive environment with 1.5 billion people. That is your market, right? So, but that's where I grew up. My granddad was a big influence for me. He was he studied till third grade in one of the Indian languages, but he could speak 11 languages. And he
Wow.
wasn't uber religious or anything, but he wanted people to come to our house and debate, right? And so he would invite philosophers and poets and politicians, and they would debate on different topics. So growing up, it was just a great exposure from a other person's point of view, and no side is completely right type of exposure. It was a lot of intelligent conversations that shaped where we wanted to be. And then my schooling was very unique as well. I studied in a convent school, which, in the Indian entire 1.5 billion population, there's probably 2 to 3% of Christian population. So having it going into a convent school, it's a mixed bag because your teachers, many of them are nuns and priests, with a mixed bag of other teachers. So you start the day with a Catholic prayer, and then you go into a Sanskrit hymn for just another 5,000-year-old language, for the Indian national anthem as an example. So it was a mixed bag of exposure that allowed us to kind of, that was the growing part. But literally growing up as a prince, that was a third thing. For the first 19 years of my life, I never ironed a shirt. Magically, my clothes appeared in my closets. Never cut an onion in my life. The dry cleaners had a special door in my household that come from the back door, and then they'll
The
pick up the
dry
dry.
cleaners had a special door in your
Yeah,
house.
yeah,
Damn.
yeah.
That's
Yeah, and
nice.
this is
Wow.
not ultra wealthy. Also, it just labor's cheap, right? So if you're middle class, upper middle class, you got a couple of cooks in the house, cleaners in the house, dry cleaners coming in and writing the notepad. I took away 20 clothes, and at the end of the month, you settle up the account. So I didn't get to
Man.
do it. So it was a very
Yeah.
naive, from that standpoint, very idealistic environment for me, where I didn't see in the grind and hustle of life that my father and my granddad had seen.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. It's I'm always fascinated because like you, Himmel. I'm an immigrant myself, and my experience wasn't similar to yours, but it was definitely a whole lot different from sort of the Americana experience that we would
Yeah.
have here now, that we experience now with our family, and able to provide the best we can, even though we're not providing necessarily or not living the same lifestyle as we did before. What do
Yep.
you think? How do you think that growing up like that kind of shaped how you eventually became? Like, what did you take away from that, from your childhood, that made Himmel the man that he is today, the father that he is today?
Yeah, I think the global exposure to a certain extent, to say there's multiple religions, there's multiple points of view, there's multiple ways of thinking about a single problem, and there's that level of acceptance that I developed over the childhood where I wasn't ever too opinionated, right? I'm very assertive, and I know, and I'm very clear with the vision and the company's goals and stuff. But if somebody taps on my shoulder and say, you might want to look at it that way, I mean, I always say, you may all have your say, but you may all not have your way with me. So I'm always open to a lot of feedback, and that makes me an eternal learner. That helps me shape, even for my kids. So that was one thing, and the second thing was just conversations, right? The ability to have right conversations at different ages with me as a father and with my kids has allowed me to have insight into their lives, shape even bigger things. Now they're 7 years old. They talk about universe and what does that mean, and what does death mean, what does finances mean, and my daughter gets to use the credit card, and so all those aspects that they won't learn in the school, or we are not as easy or approachable to talk about nowadays, or even before. It's just made it very natural for me to have those kinds of conversations very consciously as well.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah. No,
Yeah, and
that sounds
you,
amazing.
yeah, no, and you mentioned that, and just going back, you said your grandfather correct me if I'm wrong, it was your grandfather who knew 11 languages, and he would bring
Yeah.
philosophers in to have those type of like debates and those conversations that were just that fascinates me. The fact that, I mean, to have that kind of exposure and that type of conversations, especially at a young age, for you, I mean, that must have been just something that's just an eye opener. Because I mean, you talk about now about your daughter, the conversations you're having now, but I can only imagine the conversations you guys were having, knowing the fact that your grandfather was just setting this up for you guys, for generations, for you guys to also be molded as you're continuing to grow up. I mean, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
for him, eternal learning was table stakes, right? It was
Yeah.
just you are a lifelong. He was a very sharp cookie, and at the age of 88, before he passed away, he would still, at 86, I think he wanted to drive a scooter with my grandma behind him, and I'm like, Granddad, time out. You got a couple of cars. Come on, you don't need to do this. You break the hip, you're done. But he would go to the office every day. He's like, if I don't work, I'll die.
What,
And so it kept his
Wow.
mind sharp. Yeah,
so
and
who
he would.
would you say he was a bigger, because a lot of times it's okay, like, listen, we have parents, and a lot of times our parents, obviously we love our parents dearly, but sometimes our
Yeah,
parents are not necessarily the biggest influence on us, on our life. Sometimes other people are. In your
yeah.
case, do you think your grandfather was probably more influencer on your life than your parents are?
In the early years, right? In the early years, when my dad was hustling, he was taking over my granddad's business. He was trying to expand it. He was busy, and that meant my granddad, because we stayed in a joint family where my grandparents lived with us. It allowed me to spend more time with my grandmother and grandfather than my parents in the early years. And they both helped me shape with love and with intelligence. They used to take me to the taekwondo classes of those days and all of that. My granddad used to do that rather than my dad. In the later years, I'm very appreciative of my father's style, and he's my biggest influencer right now. He's a big jokester, doesn't take life seriously, stays in his lane. He loves playing pranks, and just life is a big game to him. So yeah, even at this stage, when I'm on a call with him, it's a laugh riot, and that allows us to stay beyond this whole, we're building something, legacy, and all the conversations that we have philosophically with ourselves. It's just at the end of the day,
That's
it's just
awesome.
amazing, fun time
That's really
of his
cool.
life.
That's really cool.
It's beautiful, man.
This is a weird question, but what language do you speak when you speak with your parents or like your family? Do you speak in English or do you speak
Yes.
another language?
No, so with my kids, it's English. With my wife and my parents, it's the state language. So if you know, India has, I think, 786 dialects and languages. So this being one of the major 10 or 12 languages, the state has a language called Gujarati. So that's what we converse in.
Okay, okay. I know it's a weird question because I'm always like, I'm again, same thing with me. Like I know I converse with my family in
Yeah.
Arabic for the most part, but a lot of times we switch tongues really quickly and speak in
Yes.
English.
Yeah.
When it
Yeah.
comes time when it's mixed company, especially, or like
Exactly.
when we're conversational, like with my brother, like always conversing in English for some reason. We don't converse in Arabic, but with my
Yeah.
mom and my sisters, we converse in Arabic. So it's just kind of
Yeah.
weird,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. It
yeah,
is. It is. Same person
yeah.
can speak two languages or three languages, and whatever you used to, that's the language you go with, and that's how you think and sometimes dream even.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So moving forward, you came to the U.S. How,
Yeah.
how did you get into management consulting? What did you do earlier on?
Yeah, so my US story, I'll tell you a little snippet there. So again, my naive 19-year-old self, my dad's taking a siesta one afternoon. This town used to take siestas in India and still does from 1 to 4 for the most part. Right? So I'm waking him up. I'm like, Dad, I got an idea. I have one friend that I know that's in my high school that just moved to this town called Charlotte in the United States. I don't know anyone else. I just know this dude, and I want to go there. And he's like, dude, whatever, right? You don't even know what exams to give. What are we talking about? Why are you waking me up at this stage, right?
He's like, "What is this
Uh,
Charlotte? Don't you want to go to New
yeah,
York,
yeah,
Boston, San Francisco?
yeah,
Like, where the hell is this Charlotte?"
yeah. He didn't take me at all seriously, but I'm like, he said, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I took it as a yes. Obviously, it was a sleepy yes, don't bother me type of yeah. But so I started giving exams and I started application. Only one college I'm applying because in the whole of the country I know one person. And so I got my acceptance at UNC Charlotte. And 2 months before I'm supposed to move here, I got my dad convinced. 2 months before I was supposed to move here, that dude that I knew moved back. So when I land here, it's zero people that I know.
Wow.
And that's when my education started, and that was 2 years of complete shock, culture shock. I'm housed with six other people, random strangers. I don't know what I'm doing. I have to find my first gig was at Chick-fil-A, and then Burger King. I worked at gas stations, laundromats, summer jobs. Seller financed my first car, a '92 Buick Century that I'm driving 7 days a week to basically earn money and going to the gigs. And so it was a big transitionary period for me. And that's when my girlfriend at that time, she had moved to the UK, so we decided to continue our relationship long distance. And she came to the US, I came to the UK to visit, and we are like, all right, this is gonna at some point once we graduate, we got to move to one town, and London seems kind of cooler than Charlotte, so why don't you move to London? So I moved to London, we got married, and then started the job applications. We didn't know what to do. We stayed at a grandma's place, $400 in hand. Didn't want to ask money from our parents. We're like, we'll figure this out. So started applying, and I got two applications processed in a few months, and one of them was in management consulting. And so that's how I started my career. It was completely accidental. It was the first gig, and they were paying the highest out of the two that job offers I had.
Unbelievable.
That is
Yep.
That's
insane.
awesome.
Yeah. Well, going
That's
back to the
awesome.
culture shock, because I mean that must have been terrifying at some point, because the main purpose of the leap was because you knew somebody going to Charlotte. Now it's
Yep.
Hemal on his own by himself, knows nobody, and I mean, this story is very similar to John's. I mean, I can see why the both of you connected really, really well, because I mean, it's a totally different world. But here, you're by yourself. So tell us a little bit about like that experience of you going through everything. I'm sure there was a lot of hurdles and everything like that were hitting you one after the other because you're by yourself. So
Yeah.
just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples, right? One, I mean, beyond the culture shock and the first couple of months of crying, there was the one thing I knew about myself was there's no turning back. If I made a decision, we're going with it. I already told my dad, I'm gonna be fine. Whatever funds I calculated is all I need. I'm not gonna need any more. So I gotta figure this out by myself. I don't know. I don't have any skills at all, right? So I'm trying to find the jobs, and then we're six folks living together in this 1, 2, 3 floor townhome by the university. and three of us know cooking. Three of us don't know it. I don't know it. And I didn't know how to make noodles, right, at all. Like, so every time I go and work at this. The first place that accepted us was Chick-fil-A, and I still have nightmares of filleting 2,000 pieces of chicken every day in the freezer, freezing hot, coming from India, right? So I'm tired. By the third week, I'm chasing and stalking this manager from Burger King, and like, guy, please, can you give me a job there? Because this job is killing me. It's backbreaking. I don't want to do this. And so, I'm trying to transition my job. I'm trying to figure out all the courses and the credits and all those systems and walking to the place. We don't have any cars or cell phones or laptops or nothing. And then when I come home, these three dudes who knew how to cook, they would think they're, from celebrity chef or something. So every time they use a ladle, they're like, oh, somebody else is cleaning this. So they made one piece of meat, but it's like a stockpile of utensils that I have to come home and then clean up because it's my job.
Were they Indian or were they American, by the way? The
Yeah, they
people
were
that you
all
worked
Indian.
with?
Yeah,
They were all
they were
Indian.
all.
Okay. Well, at least that was easier for you than to
That was
have
easier.
to.
It was all
Yeah.
again, but different cultures within India. India is like European Union, so many of them spoke languages that were Greek to me, and then native tongues. Everybody knew pretty much Hindi, the national language, and could converse in English. So that was a
Yeah.
good common denominator. But
Yeah.
they grew up with different exposures, different lifestyles, different culture. So it was still an amalgamation of things and personalities and stuff. But yeah, so that prompted me to start learning how to cook. And the first time I
Nice.
put a pressure cooker and put lentils in there, I didn't even know. This is how naive I was back then. I didn't know that you have to actually get the pressure off before you open it. So I
Oh
did
my
the most
gosh.
dangerous thing you can do and just opened the whole thing. I blasted off, yellow washed the walls. It's all yellow curry and lentil soup on the wall. And
Oh,
but slowly
damn.
learned cooking because I didn't want to clean all the time. Learned how to iron my shirts and got into life. I still hate ironing shirts, by the way. That's one thing I don't want to do. Yeah,
Well, you're no longer filleting chicken though. That's good. That's
yeah,
it's
that's been great for
that's
sure.
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can sympathize. I can sympathize with almost all of that. So
Yeah.
yeah. Not the Chick-fil-A. I think I got my first job well, actually my first job ever here in the United States was at a movie theater. I was like
Oh, sweet.
I was like an usher, pouring popcorn, like doing the concessions. That was my first job ever here in the United States.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And the other thing, one thing I mentioned is, I don't know if you come from a different culture, there's a sense of like, certain jobs are reserved for folks that are middle class or upper middle class. So I'm here as a student. I got the Burger King job, and everything's easy peasy. You're frying fries and burgers and all of that, and through the day, through your shift. But at the end of the shift, you have two choices. One, either you can take the trash out and basically walk around the cafeteria with 700 other students, and some of them you now know you, wearing your Burger King clothes, and picking up the trash and putting it in the place, and then go to the compactor and get the trash kind of compacted, or you get to wash and clean all the crud from the frying machine, which is
Mm,
back. But I would
mm.
almost, for the first few months, I would almost volunteer for that back-breaking stuff. Right? I'm like, I'm not going that. That's stupid, right? I put my head down. I'm not picking trash up in front of 700 people. That's just too much egoistic for me, right? I didn't come from that. That's how I used to think. And then I found out that the people who pick the trash, they go out for a smoke and they're chilling out for an hour and a half while doing all this compacting, while we are breaking our backs with all the crud cleaning and mopping the floors and everything, and then like this seems to be great. And it took me 6 months to whistle down the hallway while picking through trash, and learning that every job comes at its own price, and every job is important, and you take what you get.
Those guys figured out the hustle of that end of the shift. They
Yes,
figured it out. They figured it out. You
yeah,
have to game the system.
yeah,
So
yeah. You get this.
Oh man, that is awesome. And
Well,
so
tell,
now you're in London.
Yeah,
Sorry, Francisco, go
yeah.
ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna
And
transition.
you landed your first job as a
Yeah.
management consultant. Was it with like a big firm, like a global firm, or like with
Yeah, it was
with a firm that was?
yep, it was with Accenture,
Oh,
which is
nice.
yeah, which was when I joined back in 2003, 2004 was 65,000 people. Now it's probably 500, 600,000 employees. So
Yeah,
truly global.
yeah.
So I started with the London office. They used to ship me around all over Europe and actually within the UK. So my first gig, this is this massive, massive project, 2, 3 billion pounds. So probably $4 billion worth of a project that they'd won for the National Health Service of the UK. They were trying to change all the doctor systems and everything. So 1,500 of us from 35 different companies and 35 different countries subcontracting for Accenture were housed in this new location in Leeds, which is about 2.5 hours from London. So I would go every Monday by train, come back every Friday. I'm married, so my wife's waiting for me. That's how we spend our weekends. And stay there for 5 days.
Oh,
And
at that point you're married. At that point
at that
when
point,
you're
I'm
there,
married. Yeah,
at
before
that point
my
you're
first
married. Okay.
job, yeah, we got married. But yeah, that's how I started my career for 4 years to 5 years in the UK. I'd done my partying and clubbing and enjoying the UK life, and I quickly realized that the January blues are real, man. They're the 3 day plastic ball that surrounds the sky where you don't even get a ray of sunshine. It's just
Yeah.
terrible. It wasn't great for me. My mood sunk in those months. And so I'm like, Accenture, you got a Charlotte office. I, convinced my wife things I connived her to move to Charlotte and said, I've quite a few friends here. The weather's nice. I
I
know
was
the
going to
place.
ask why did you even choose Charlotte again? I'm just curious. It's
It was
like
just a sense
because
of belonging here because I knew if I had to restart again, that journey that I'd taken where I didn't know anybody the first time was just too scary. So I'm like,
yeah,
now I have
makes
a
sense.
few college friends. My wife and I actually got hosted by a few friends. We stayed at their place for a few weeks for her to see how beautiful Charlotte is before we made the decision, and then asked my Accenture as a company to move me here, and then started working here for the last, from 2008 is when we moved down to I think 2015 is when I left Accenture. So another 7 years of working with them.
When you
Okay.
made your move out to Charlotte, were you still working with the Vatican, or tell us a little bit about that story? So I'm kind of intrigued by that.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
So
Let's
Accenture,
go back to the Vatican. Yeah, that's what I want to hear about. The
yeah.
little birdie,
So
the little birdie
no,
being you told us mentioned the Vatican. So let's go back to that one.
yeah. So it was different. You in the management consulting world, even since I was 22 years old, you basically going on the other side of the team. You're going to a client side. The clients might state that, hey, I have an issue or a problem or a challenge, and I'm hiring you guys to either solve it or I don't know what my problem is, but I want to do X. And then you bring in a team of consultants, and you might stay there for 3 months, 6 months, 5 weeks, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that challenge requires. Then at some point you move out of that client space. So what it taught me before I go into the story, it was just because I did probably 2 dozen projects within that 15 years time frame, and almost every project I have a different client, obviously. It's a different environment. You get placed in a closet or given a plush office. You don't know what's coming up to you, how receptive they are as a company beyond the leadership who hired her to even solve this. And they might think that the consultants coming in, cutting jobs. You have to create your own team members and lead them. So you have to read people really nicely. You have to understand the organizational politics, and there's just a lot of skill set, soft skill set developed as a leadership that a consultant has as a generalist because they can be in any spot and they can figure things out. Right, it's problem solving at that level. So that was my journey for 15 years. But out of that one, I think when I was in the US, we had the Vatican Ministry of Communications engaging us and saying we want to understand how to build an omni-channel strategy for our Catholic population. We want to reach out to them more through mobile and blogs and other websites and other things, that there is more outreach. And so it was, it wasn't like I was working with the Pope or anything. It was one of the departments that actually needed a strategy to figure out how best to do what they do, is communicate with their people. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it.
Don't know a lot of
I like
people
it.
who actually
I-
had the Vatican as their client, so it's definitely a
No, no.
big thing.
It's definitely a big thing. Yeah, yeah. It's fun times. There were quite a few fun gigs, and then you build a sense of camaraderie. People followed me when I started the leadership journey into different projects. I figured out how good a
Yep,
leader I am, what kind of leader I am. So there was a lot of introspection there as well
for
for
sure.
me.
So what did you figure out? What did you early on? What was your impression of yourself as a leader, and what you
Yeah, early on,
actually what was your impression of leadership? Not just what kind of leader you are, but what was your impression of what leadership was like?
yeah, I think I knew who I didn't like as a leader and who I liked as a leader, because I had several of them. And I think the people who were almost in terms of outcome versus almost to a point of they want to, I don't care what's happening in your life, but you need to do this. That kind of statements didn't gel well with me. And there were some leaders that were those kinds of leaders versus collaboration. I am at the back. I'm the last person, and if you need me to be the 12th man carrying the water bottle or score a running touchdown, I will do whatever is needed to fill the gap. And if you got it, you're on autopilot. You can come to me in weeks and me. Or if you need me to come daily and ask you 5 times what's needed, what do you need help with, then I will do that as well. So that level of flexibility and understanding my role as a leader, that I'm looking at the forward thinking. I've got a team that if I've chosen them right, they're good people, they're rock stars in their own lanes and competencies, and I'm driving this ship with multiple rudders, and you really need to make sure everyone is kind of going in the right way. And if something's slowing down, I'm fixing that rather than trying to give orders to everyone, even though they might be doing some great work. So that was the biggest takeaway for me and how I shaped my leadership going forward.
And
That's
then did
amazing.
you end up changing your stance on your leadership as you became a leader yourself and after when you established Exponential and all that kind of stuff? So how did that change as you now, in a true way, establish yourself as a leader?
Yeah, I think my stance has been pretty similar as this was developed. That's the style of leader I want to be. I think two things I added to my leadership toolkit was one, building loyalties which money can't buy, and I had so much vested time and energy into many of my direct reports from middle management that they would actually follow me, and they're like, Hemal, I don't care which role you give me. I just want to work with you because you're a great leader. And as you go up in the ladder, corporate ladder, I'll be going up with you as well. And so there was a sense of loyalty that got translated as I built my commercial real estate business, of people just getting attracted from that standpoint. And then the second thing is, what I added, which I didn't have to do too much, was, figuring out more bad news and how to give them, right? So it was, firing people, negotiating tough contracts, all those things when you're a servant leader, in more collaborative type of natural leadership type of stance, it's harder for you to do those things. It's painful. And so I had to develop that muscle consciously to say, hey guys, this is not going to work. I love you, but I'd love to work with you maybe the next time. And that
Yeah.
that that has been an addition that I had to, that comes with the CEO hat that I didn't have, even though I was a leader, senior leader in many of those organizations.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. And Hamo, I'm curious, what is your take on self-made of someone when they say I am self-made. And the reason I ask is because you've been around a lot of leaders, and so I'm curious, as you went through a lot of stuff, and I know that's something that a lot of folks, even today, entrepreneurs, they say, oh, well, I'm a self-made either millionaire, or I'm self-made by myself. I did all this by myself. I had humble beginnings, but I am where I am today because of me. But I find it's all perspective, and I find it hard for me to be able to swallow that, because again, we're built up by a lot of our cohorts, or our leaders, our mentors who are around us. Those are the ones who really mold us, and we're really not self-made. We're made of who we are today by the little things that we learn and we value from those who are around us and who brought us up. So I'm curious, what is your perspective or your thoughts on being self-made?
Yeah, this is where I get to give a consultant's answer. And here it is, right? It depends on how you look at it, right? So if I am standing next to a person that doesn't have the drive, and we both find the most amazing mentor, what I imbibe into my daily routines or learnings versus what that other person, him or her, would do, is going to be completely different. So there's a sense of a drive, hunger, a passion, an intelligence within you that allows you to take those sources of information from external factors and all the things that are out there to kind of process it and utilize it, not just keep it as knowledge that you can, provide to people over a conversation, actually implement and execute it. And that's the self part. But then to your point, all that information is coming from the synergies of the universe, and whoever says he or she is truly self-made doesn't understand the laws of the universe. You're just a speck within the entirety of all the things that are happening, and you're here at this stage because there's other things happening around you that you might not even provide perspective to, because you're in that spotlight and you can't provide that floodlight of all the events that are happening, and our brains can't even process them. So there's both sides to it. There's something in me that allows me to do things uniquely and work with people that nobody else would, versus what's in you and how your journey is driven. And so there's that self-made part as well.
That's deep.
Wow.
That's deep, man. I
That
can see why you're a superstar as a consultant, man. You just that's why you got the Vatican gig. That's why he put you on the Vatican gig, because you're able to reach down in there, man. Yeah, I like it. It is true though. It is true. I mean, the way that we each person's journey is different, and just the way that I agree with you to a large extent about like what my journey and what my the way that I approach things and resolving issues and resolving problems, and it may not be the same as somebody else that is working with me or for me or whatever, but there are some commonalities that we have to share in order for that dynamic to work. So they may not, Francisco and I, obviously are partners, but we don't do exactly the same thing. We don't look at things the same. We don't necessarily, but we both have the same insatiable hunger and drive and attitude about getting things done. Absolutely. That we share. That is something I don't have to necessarily convince Francisco about, and he doesn't have to convince me about. It's already there. So that because that's something you can't necessarily create in somebody else. That's something that they either have it or they don't have it.
Yeah. I always tell people when I hire drill sergeants, right? They should have these 4 qualities: driven, resilient, high integrity, and loyalty. Competence for certain functions can be taught, but those 4 things have to come from within, and either you have it or you don't.
Competence is information. To me, competence is just information. And the word competence is only really the use of certain information, using your personality, using your drive, leveraging your higher level cognitive skills, your higher level commitment and integrity and communication, all that kind of stuff. All of that comes into playing into your competence, but the underlying data that goes into competence could be taught. That could be taught from anybody. I mean, I don't need I don't, and that's what I hire. Francisco and I, we don't, when we look at bringing anybody else new on board with us at Peak 15, I don't necessarily look for just their skills. I could care less about their skills. I can teach them.
Yeah.
I can teach anybody about commercial real estate. I can't teach someone their own self-drive. That's something I cannot teach.
Exactly. And the way that I've built businesses is, I think about like the Fortune 100 companies and, for example, a bank, right? And if you think about bank and its divisions, there's a consumer division, there's a mortgage division, there's a credit card division, there's a lending division. And now if refinances are not cheap, your lending division can slow down, but your credit card debt goes high and you might have more volume there. So at the end of the day, what verticals allow you to do is, have more predictable top line and bottom line. But to create each of those divisions, you need someone at the helm of those divisions. And I've literally made businesses around once I find someone like that. It doesn't have to be that I went looking for that person. If I find someone, I'm like, that's amazing. I'm going to build a business around you. And that's how we created within the company. And so you're absolutely right. If you have that in you, and if you can recognize that in another person, there's magic that's going to happen if you synergize with that person.
That is amazing.
100%.
I love that.
I agree.
I love how you put that. It's like you find that one person that the things you can teach, that desire, that hunger, and you build a business around them. I like how you worded that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And going back and digging from your childhood, I know you mentioned you were around your father, your grandfather, very entrepreneurial. That whole side of India was very entrepreneurial spirited. So it's in your DNA. What made you, or when that entrepreneur bug kicked in and said, you know what, I'm just taking the leap and I'm just going to go ahead and just do Exponential, what you're doing today? Like what was going through your mind at that point, and what made you kind of take that leap?
Yeah, it was, again, boredom, right? So I landed a very cushy job at the bank, senior position. I went from working 80-hour weeks to 30-hour weeks. And I had an executive assistant, small team, and I was still a rock star, working 30-hour weeks. And I'm just come from a family of workaholics, man. So I'm like, I need to do something. And so side hobby, like, what do I know? I come from the technology world and outsourcing and innovation. Let me start an outsourcing company and see how labor arbitrage works. And as I did that, I tested it out, from, hey, can I do this for the next 10 years without getting bored? And B, what am I learning? So I learned that I can scale anything super quickly, but it wasn't something that I wanted to do for 10 years. So I sold it off, got some money, started a lending practice for house flippers and stuff, got some other people's money. So I knew how to work with other people and get their funds in. And that led to a journey of, these residential flippers and wholesalers earn more money than I would ever in a house lending. And there's a limit to how much I can lend because it's my money and plus a few other people. There has to be some other way of scalability. So that bug went in, and I'm like, I could be them. And so 2019, I started my wholesaling and flipping business, and then I scaled it up to 10 employees, and at one point was sending 70,000 texts a month and, flipping paper like anything. But again, I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. So that led me to another introspection. So it's been a journey of really being aware and talking to myself and pivoting when I'm clear that this is something I want to do or not do, and not worry about the noise. And that's something that came from my dad and my granddad was, one thing, be completely non-flashy, and be completely frugal, right? And that was how they operated. They had hustled too. They would go to FedEx companies and they're like, "Can we rent your warehouse and not even pay for it?" And they would use the FedEx trucks and warehouses without paying a dime. They never owned a warehouse, and we'll ship things across the state for 30 years. And there was just through relationships. They'd never had a flashy office or any of that. And so that's how I grew. Is, if I'm clear, I don't need noise saying somebody else is doing this, somebody else is doing. I would change pretty quickly, and that's helped me through this evolution of my businesses and my journey in life.
That's awesome. That's tremendous. That is tremendous. the concept of not listening to the noise and kind of sticking to your core values and doing what you believe your mission statement happens to be, and that mission statement can change obviously over time because you're the one that's changing it and you're determining that, but you're not determining that based on popular noise or whatever outside external pressures are bringing in on you. That's tremendously important, in a lot of successful entrepreneurs, because it's if you have to stop and listen to outside noise on every little step you do, you're never going to get ahead. You're never going to. I mean, because a lot of times noise is going to tell you something that you should not be doing that may end up being your biggest successes, and it's been proven over and over again through many companies that that's been the case. So many companies, you hear endless stories of successful companies, from Apple on down to, people or whatever telling them like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this product, or you shouldn't be doing this line, or you shouldn't be doing this venture because that's a bad time to do it. That's not the right product to do it. That's not the right way to do it.
Exactly.
But they believed in it so doggedly that they pushed forward, and it doesn't matter, Again, I'm not saying that to be mistaken with course correction along the way and learning, because you do absolutely have to learn and course correct along the way. So
I think Jim Rohn had a quote that I love. It's be a student, not a follower. Right? You always learn. You process it yourself. You understand what could mean for your journey. But if you follow anything or anyone blindly, that could lead to a potentially dangerous situation.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. I 100% agree. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's I'm hurting us forward towards what you are doing now. So you tried a couple of different ventures. You did a lending. You did a labor arbitrage, and then you thought like, oh, man, I don't have enough to do with my time. Let me start a commercial real estate company.
Yeah. So 2019, end of 2019, I was getting bored with, not bored, but I wasn't liking the conversation I was having with distressed sellers for these flipping houses, type of contracts. I had 10 employees. I could scale them to 100. I could make multiple 7 figures a year easy in that business, with VAs for the most part. So it was a great business of earning money, but not bringing happiness in myself. And so at that, whenever you're at that point, I believe that a teacher appears. And so I had listened to Brandon Turner, Bigger Pockets guy. He spoke at that point how he hired a performance coach, and that kind of helped him pivot his life. So I started stalking that performance coach on Instagram, trying to understand if that the way he puts words, it resonates with me or not. And I quickly found out, okay, this seems like a good conversation, at least for me, this pivot that I need for the next 6 months. I need someone else to tell me what I probably in my heart of heart know. So I call him January of 2020, 2 months before COVID hits. I'm still working as the senior vice president. I have the wholesaling flipping business going in full swing. And I'm like, hey, Jason, his name is Jason. Jason, I have this conundrum in my life. I have something that I could 10x on a ton of money, but I'm unhappy with it, or I don't know what to do. And so he was like, you need to shut down your business. And the rationale that he provided was, you cannot climb up a new mountain unless you climb down the one that you're on. And you cannot go from a senior executive at Accenture to senior vice president at the bank to flipping houses. You can't do that. It's not going to work out for you long term. You have to find something where you are actually getting into that senior executive role and can work at that and operate at that level. I'm like, dude, I have nothing. So it's like, but yeah, you got your job. What are you afraid of? Yeah, you'll lose some money with opportunity cost, but what are you afraid of? So I took his advice. I shut down an entire stream of revenue for me in January of 2020, and then COVID hit. So that was a blessing, because I was trying to figure out how can I get a new place. Can I build a new hotel? I was looking at hotels because a bunch of friends were building one. I'm glad I didn't do that. And that's when I stumbled across real estate syndication. I'm like, this is amazing, because allows me to stay in my lane on what I like to do best, and then allows me to build a team, really build a company that can mirror over a Fortune 100 company, even though it doesn't have to be size-wise that big, but let's see where it goes. So started
Yeah.
learning about it through 5 passive investments, with 5 intentionally specific operators. Some were up and coming, some were seasoned, and just to get their playbooks, right? So management consulting 101, if you want to understand your competition, you get competitive intelligence and everybody's playbook, and then you build your own. So we did that for 5 months. I had my business partner Yomesh at that time. He and I talked. I'm like, hey, this is something that I know that you are completely complementary to me. Do you want to team up and go for this? And so we made then a focused, intentional decision to actually build a company and not just doing the passive investment. And that's how we got started. September of 2020, we got going till basically now. We've built 4 divisions within the company.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
I
excited.
love how
I've been blessed to witness this journey from almost, I want to say almost from day one, because I think I met you right when you were still leaving your job
Yeah,
and getting ready to launch Exponential.
yeah, absolutely.
So I'm even
yeah,
thankful to be witness to your growth and to your journey.
yeah. And it's
Yeah,
great that, I mean, every decision should be intentional. And I love how the fact that if you're going to go in on something, you need to be intentional with your decisions and you be intentional with how you're going to get this company up and going. And the fact that you purposely did your investments, your passive investments, for you to also get that know-how from those either seasoned or up and coming sponsors. Everything like that has to definitely be intentional, and I think you've been doing everything right. You're playing chess for sure.
yeah.
Looks
That's one of my
yeah,
favorite quotes. Don't play chess, not checkers. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so look, Hemel, we're coming towards the end of our episode, so we're probably going to go in to our fire round. John,
Okay.
I'll let you kind of get started on this one.
Yeah, yeah. I would say this is going to be an easy question. Well, easy for me to ask, maybe not so easy for you to answer necessarily. But what would you say the biggest takeaway, or maybe the biggest lesson you've learned in the past? I'm not even going to go back to your childhood. I would say just in the past 5 years, 3 to 5 years of your journey from different levels of non-entrepreneurship to entrepreneurship to launching, a couple of different companies. What is the biggest lesson you've taken away in the past 3 to 5 years? And give me 2 answers: one about yourself and one about your business.
Yeah, I think about myself is reminding myself on a daily basis that you play fast in the micro and slow in the macro, right? You gotta make sure every day counts, and be focused on the process, which is a cliched statement, but don't worry about the outcome. You be focused on the list, planning next day, whether it's with my workout, whether it's the way I eat. And that comes from a vision of, hey, if I take something, I want to be the top 1% of that. So right now I'm on a fitness journey. My role as a father, my role as a husband, my role as a leader of the company, all of that, I want to be the best 1% of the world in terms of what I do. And so that defines my days, and I'm very intentional and fast in the micro. But I also know that some of these things take time. It could take 5 years, 6 months, 8 months. So I don't put in dates like other people. I don't put in, hey, I need to be 1,000 drawers. I need to be 10% body weight in 2 months. I want to do 75 hard. I just say I want to be the top 1%, and that will lead me. It'll take whatever it will take, and
I
that's
love
okay.
that. I
Yeah,
love that. Yeah,
yeah.
fast in the micro, slow in the macro. I love that. So what was the
Yeah,
second part about your business that you've learned?
So my business, it's been, if I have the clarity to define where and if I can master and understand the market cycle, which I believe I'm pretty good at, I can do non-conventional stuff and generate extreme amount of returns versus the lowest risk that most people create in this business. and that has allowed us to pivot multiple times over the last 5 years in from not from a professional to non-professional, and then within commercial estate. I mean, that's how
Yeah.
we created our land company, our development company. We bought this new foreign fund center. All of those are chess pieces to get us to that journey and thinking in a way that nobody else thinks, and that's okay. And as long as I'm super clear about what we are doing, I think we'll be in a great shape.
Tremendous. Tremendous. Francisco?
Yep. Yeah, so I'm a big believer in that private disciplines really pave the way for public success. And so a lot of what you just mentioned, going to second to John's question and what you said on what you learned from the past 5 years, with that comes a lot of discipline, a lot of strategic habits. What are some of those private disciplines that you have now and that you can share with the audience with some of those some of the private disciplines and some of those strategic habits that you have today?
Yeah, it's again starts from the belief. So whenever I talk to myself, there are two things I say to myself. One, if I do something, I'm gonna do it 100%. And B, it doesn't matter what time frame it takes, I'm just gonna do it, right? And whether it's hiking, I hiked Machu Picchu as the most unfit person out of the entire group, and I told them, I'm like, hey, I got my rock songs, I'm gonna do my jam, there's no signal, you guys can be 2 hours ahead of me, and that's fine. I'll be there, man. I'm gonna show up, and that's how I show up in life, right? So I show up on a daily basis from that perspective. But then private discipline, I think the health has been my biggest game changer, just to be very tactical. And again, hiring a coach, any place where I needed help, I went out and sought help without any ego. I didn't say I know everything, and I hired a coach. And then when I found someone who was willing to do and had results that I knew could be derived, then I just followed them to the T. I don't
Yeah.
devote any thinking or energetic time once I find a coach and they say, I have this game plan, you just do that. And your life will be amazing. And that's what I've done. And I'm in the best shape of my life ever right now.
That is amazing. That is great. Yeah, because and kind of just to chime in into what you just said, I mean, I think that that's a skill all of its own, being able to just come in without an ego and just be vulnerable on things that you don't know, and you go out and you seek help on those
Yeah.
areas. Because I think there's, especially us as, I mean, as leaders, as shakers and movers in the industry, we at times feel that pressure, that kind of almost like a burden that, hey, you know what, I need to know everything, but
Yeah.
you don't really need to know everything. You can go out, you can be vulnerable and say, you know what, I don't know this, but let me go and find out. And I think that takes a lot of skill for someone to be able to be self-aware that, you know what, I can't do this, but let me go ahead and seek help for that specific area where I'm weak at.
Yeah, I don't think you can be authentic to yourself if you don't do
Yeah.
that. I don't believe in the whole fake it till you make it crap at the end of the day. Either I am or I'm not. And if I'm not, I'm sure I'll find someone. If I want to be that way intentionally, I'll find someone who does it amazingly and borrow their playbook and build my own.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Hemal. I don't believe in the fake it till you make it. I believe into stepping into bigger shoes than fits you sometimes in order for you to grow into those shoes.
Yes.
Because, it's not you don't need to fake anything, but it's okay for you to take on challenges that are bigger than you. In fact, you should take on challenges bigger than you. That's how
That's
you
the only
grow.
way.
That's the only way to grow.
It's the only
If
way.
if you don't take on challenges bigger than you, if you don't take on a challenge and you look at this challenge and think, man, this is gonna kick my ass. Like, I don't know if I can do this. Then that means that's the right challenge for you.
Yeah.
If you look at a challenge and go, oh man, this is gonna be a piece of pie.
Yeah.
That's not the right way.
It's not big enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially this business is not for the faint of heart, right? We solve tremendous amounts of problems, some of them big problems involving multi-million dollar of equity, debt. I mean, they could wipe
Yeah.
us
Oh
out,
yeah.
right? And so you got to be clear, you got to be confident of what you do and what you don't know. So there has to be a level of self-belief that most people might not even have in order to operate in this business and solve those problems. I completely agree.
Well, I think to Francisco's point, sometimes you have to take steps on things that you don't maybe not have all the data on. Like you're gonna,
Yeah.
and that's just the nature of the beast. We have to execute on things that we know enough about to be, to make headway and to be successful at, or to figure out. But we're not going to have all the data. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm never going to have all the data. I'm not, like people ask me, like, oh, do you have confidence in the market? Like, I don't know I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
I don't know what the market is going to do. What I can tell you is what we do on a day-to-day basis. What I can tell you is how we look at underwriting. What I can tell you is how we look at deals when they come our way, and how we approach our numbers and how we approach our acquisitions. That I can control, and I can tell you how we do. And hopefully through doing these repetitive steps over and over again, we end up exposing ourselves to things that are going to fit our shoes at some point. And we become that crystal ball that we're hoping to see. So, I'm never going to know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm never going to know what's going to happen in the state of the industry. I'm never going to guarantee you that I'm going to be the biggest sage in the industry. That would be foolish,
Yeah.
So,
That's a good segue. We're rebranding to Sage Equity, so we want to be the biggest sages in the industry.
I like it. I love it. Oh man. Well, that is it for me, my friend. We totally appreciate you being here with us. It's been a pleasure as always. How would people know where to reach you? How would people find you? You want to kind of give us a little snippet, and they'll be in the show notes as well. But give us where people can find you.
So yeah, we are rebranding. So at some point we'll be called sageequity.com, and you'll see Sage at all our buildings to plaster our name and our legacy onto it, and show people the progress that we're making across the Carolinas. In the meantime, my email address is Hemal, Hemal, at exponential-equity.com. That's our company name, Exponential-Equity. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. So you can connect me, and I love talking about real estate. So anybody who's looking, any of your listeners who are looking to know more about ground up construction, land, foreign funds, multifamily, just the Carolinas, happy to chat about multiple asset classes with you all.
Amazing.
Awesome.
A breadth of information. Hemal Badiani, thank you so much again for joining us, my man.
Thank you both.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.